This week on The Inside Story, it's the annual meeting of delegations and heads of state in New York City. What is the United Nations General Assembly, and what are world leaders saying at the summit? We take you inside the massive event and discuss what will come out of it. Now, on The Inside Story, the United Nations General Assembly, Rebuilding Trust.
I'm Jessica Dorit, VOA's Press Freedom Editor here at the UN headquarters with the East River just behind me. This week on The Inside Story, we're at the United Nations General Assembly. Leaders are gathered here to promote the UN Agenda 2030, an ambitious plan to combat poverty and promote peace around the world. With a long-running war in Europe, simmering tensions in Asia, political upheaval in Africa, and a warming planet promoting instability and insecurity, this year's annual event is focused on promoting trust and restoring stability. With conflicts, coups and repressive regimes, there's an urgent need for dialogue and access to credible information. Our White House correspondent, Patsy Widakuswara, starts us off.
Addressing the United Nations General Assembly, President Joe Biden renewed his call for international support for Ukraine.
If we abandon the core principles of the United States to appease an aggressor, can any member state in this body feel confident that they are protected? If we allow Ukraine to be carved up, is the independence of any nation secure?
This is the second year Biden has rallied for Ukraine in front of the world body. But amid global South concerns that Ukraine dominates the meeting at the cost of other challenges, Biden did not mention Russia's invasion until minute 22 of his 27-minute speech. While a majority of countries supported a resolution condemning Russia's invasion last year, many are increasingly concerned about the war's toll on global energy and food prices. There are now growing calls from the global south to fast-track peace negotiations between Moscow and Kyiv.
No, we do not underestimate the difficulties in achieving peace. But no solution will be lasting if it is not based on dialogue. I have reiterated that work needs to be done to create space for negotiations.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made his own appeal in his first in-person appearance at the General Assembly since the invasion.
And it is a clear Russia's attempt to weaponize the food shortage on the global market in exchange for recognition for some, if not all, of the captured territories.
With leaders from China, France, Russia, and the United Kingdom skipping the summit, Biden is the only leader of a UN Security Council permanent member attending. He outlined U.S. efforts to mobilize resources for global infrastructure projects, reform international institutions to make them more inclusive, and address other global challenges.
Record-breaking heat waves in the United States and China, wildfires ravaging North America and Southern Europe, a fifth year of drought in the Horn of Africa, tragic flooding in Libya. My heart goes out to the people of Libya that's killed thousands of people. Together, these snapshots tell an urgent story of what awaits us if we fail to reduce our dependence on fossil fuels and begin to climate-proof the world.
Activists say more needs to be done as thousands of them march outside, demanding that the Biden administration end new fossil fuel projects. Patsy Widakuswara, VOA News, New York.
Not all countries have representation, among them Afghanistan. The UN envoy for Afghanistan told the Taliban in June that international recognition is nearly impossible until women are allowed back into society. The situation for Afghan women since the Taliban seized power has been dire, with repressive policies in effect silencing half the population, and with more than 80% of female journalists no longer working. Heather Barr of Human Rights Watch says the international community needs to act for the sake of women everywhere. Here she is from Cape Town, South Africa.
Since the Taliban took over control of the country, we've seen them engaging in all different kinds of human rights abuses, including extrajudicial killings, silencing of the media, torture, and many other abuses. But the most significant and the type of abuse that seems to be deepening day by day is their attack on the rights of women and girls. They've stripped women and girls of virtually all of their rights. They started, of course, with banning secondary education. They later banned higher education. They've banned women from most types of employment. They've taken away women's freedom of movement, which blocks them from many other rights, including even something as basic as getting emergency health care. And we see that there are new abuses almost on a daily basis recently. And what's particularly alarming is we don't know what the end point of this is. We don't know how much further they might go in taking away these rights. And it's created a very, very desperate situation for women and girls in the country. The security situation for women and girls now is devastating. One of the first things that the Taliban did was dismantle the entire system that had been put in place to deal with gender-based violence. Shelters, specialized prosecution units, specialized courts, legal services, social services, and the law itself, the 2009 Law on Elimination of Violence Against Women, effectively doesn't exist anymore. The Taliban banned the Ministry of Women's Affairs. They banned the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission. They very, very intentionally dismantled all of the protections that existed in the country, and we see the consequences of that in women's daily lives. Human Rights Watch has issued a report last week finding that the Taliban have committed gender persecution in Afghanistan. Gender persecution is a crime within the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. So we've called on the International Criminal Court to take action against the Taliban for these abuses in Afghanistan, and that would come in the form of arrest warrants and prosecutions. Over the last 2 years, we've heard a lot from diplomats about how important it is to engage with the Taliban, and there's been an enormous amount of engagement with the Taliban. None of this engagement has produced any changes with regard to human rights. We really believe that if the international community doesn't respond to this women's rights crisis, then that's a problem for women everywhere. That lowers the bar on what's being tolerated on this planet with regard to women's rights, and that's got very dire implications for all of us. And we want the Human Rights Council to renew the mandate of the Special Rapporteur on the human rights situation in Afghanistan, but also create a new separate UN mechanism to collect and preserve evidence of the crimes that are being committed in Afghanistan so that there can be justice for those crimes. In New York, the Security Council has mandated an assessment of the international response in Afghanistan. That assessment is due by November 17th. That could be a useful tool, but only if it really focuses on human rights and centers the voices and the rights of women and girls. And so we're asking the members of the Security Council to view the result of that assessment through those eyes, about whether it's really upholding human rights. So another thing that the international community can do that they've been failing to do is to make sure that Afghan women are actually full participants in all of the discussions about the future of Afghanistan. We've seen again and again and again that they've been shut out of really critical meetings that have happened and really important discussions. This time, Afghan women have to be there. They have to be at the table.
Russia's war on neighbouring Ukraine is high on the agenda at the UNGA. With Zelensky in New York, Ukrainian journalists are closely following developments. My colleague, Christina Casada-Smith, spent time with them. Christina, what was your impression of the challenges that journalists face from Ukraine?
Jessica, I had the opportunity to spend the day with Dmitry Anopchenko, the U.S. correspondent for Ukraine's intermediate group here at the UN. We talked about how the war has changed news coverage and what stories he is focused on at the UN. Even with 5 years' experience as a foreign correspondent, Ukrainian journalist Dmitry Anopchenko says nothing could have prepared him for covering a war in his own country. With President Volodymyr Zelensky addressing the UN General Assembly in person, Anopchenko has a full day of work and a pressing question.
The main question for my audience, for all the Ukrainians, how Zelensky and how the US administration understands the moment when the war will stop. It is what I'm intending to ask President Zelensky and President Biden if I will have a chance.
The reporter works for Inter TV channel, but since the full invasion, 6 of Ukraine's main broadcasters, including Inter TV channel, have integrated to feed a non-stop news cycle. Back in Kyiv, editor-in-chief Victoria Naidionova described their priorities.
Speaking for all journalists is, of course, information verification. To verify information, wait until final confirmation of any information.
Leading a newsroom at this time is tough.
For me as the editor-in-chief, the biggest challenge is trying to maintain a kind of balance between my duty to preserve the life and health of journalists and at the same time to cover events that are happening on the front line.
Vladislav Polit, who heads international news at the outlet, says Anopchenko plays a crucial role as Washington correspondent.
The reaction to President Zelensky's speech, what do officials think? What do people in America think? How will they react to our president's speech?
But covering the UN General Assembly is just one of many hats Anopchenko wears. The journalist also covers the Pentagon, US State Department, White House, and Congress, and provides an antidote to the flood of Russian propaganda online.
The Russian sources, they try to hide themselves. They are reporting like it's Ukrainian media or some Ukrainian journalist. They are telling our army, our country about Ukraine.
More than a year into the war, Moscow continues to deploy false and misleading information about the conflict, an Atlantic Council report found.
That is why I have to, not the double check, but triple check the information with the sources, with the officials, because I don't have to be like them.
In times of war, Anopchenko knows his reporting comes with extra responsibility.
The government asked people not to post the picture of the results of the bombing, and everyone told, "Okay, we got our rights. We want to post." What happened after that? The Russian military who sent the rockets, they monitored the social media, they saw the result, and they corrected the rockets.
Still, there is one story the Ukrainian journalist is looking forward to covering: the end of the conflict.
Gosh, it will be so emotional. I'm even afraid to think about this. I hope it will be soon. I hope it will be as soon as possible, because everyone, I'll tell you, honestly, we're so tired living every moment and waiting that someone you love will not be alive tomorrow.
Until that moment, Anopchenko will keep doing what he does best, reporting on developments for his audience. Cristina Caicedo-Smith, VOA News, New York.
Thousands of journalists come to New York each September to cover this high-level event. Our Latin American correspondent Celia Mendoza has more on what goes into covering the UNGA.
193 member states, 2 weeks of high-level meetings, and an event that attracts hundreds of journalists from across the world. The annual UN General Assembly brings together some of the most powerful people in the world, and with them, media from their home countries.
The journalists gather here on Press Island, a one-block section outside the New York headquarters.
This year, the UN handled around 3,000 media accreditations from journalists in more than 170 countries. With conflict, climate change, inequality, and the fast rise in artificial intelligence, dignitaries who gather here have plenty to discuss. But what issues are the citizens they represent most focused on?
Bangladeshi people are actually suffering from the corona pandemic, after the corona pandemic and the Ukraine-Russia war. So the price hike. So our Prime Minister appealed the world to richest countries to contribute the developing country and to recover the situation and to stop the war.
In the UN, we are most interested in the topic that is for us the most important. Our president will be here in the United Nations and he will talk about Kosovo.
The main focus of the media these days are the SDGs and also the Security Council's work on the conflicts of international matters, especially Ukraine, let's say Libya, Syria and Yemen. And I think that the work of the UN that do, especially during this week, is very important because not only they are here to try to mediate between conflicts, but also to expose these problems and try to have more and more people interested on them.
Ensuring media access reflects the United Nations commitment to press freedom, which is enshrined in the UN Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Article 19 says, everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. And UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has been a vocal defender of press freedom, saying on World Press Freedom Day,
"Freedom of the press is the foundation of democracy and justice. It gives all of us the facts we need to shape opinions and speak truth to power."
But Guterres also warns of the threat to that right from disinformation and authoritarian rule.
Meanwhile, journalists and media workers are directly targeted on and offline as they carry out their vital work. They are routinely harassed, intimidated, detained, and imprisoned.
The number of journalists behind bars hit a record high last year, says the Committee to Protect Journalists, with countries like Belarus, China, Iran, and Turkey imprisoning dozens of reporters for seeking the truth.
The state of human rights globally is another issue the media gathered here in New York will be pressing world leaders about. Celia Mendoza, VOA News, New York.
Part of the agenda here at the UNGA 2023 is global health. Scientists working to create vaccines to protect the public during the global coronavirus pandemic found themselves confronting an unexpected danger: disinformation. In an interview with VOA, Dr. Peter Hotez, who developed a non-profit vaccine and became a trusted voice during the pandemic, warns of the danger of disinformation, as detailed in his new book, The Deadly Rise of Anti-Science.
Anti-science now is a lethal societal force. 200,000 Americans perished because of it. It's not stopping in the US, it's extending throughout North America, Europe, now into low and middle income countries. It has the ability to reverse all of the amazing global goals we've had since 2000, the Millennium Development Goals, the Sustainable Development Goals. It's that much of a threat. So that's one concern I have, is the globalization and going beyond COVID vaccines to all childhood immunizations. My second big concern is it's targeting not only the science, but the scientists. You know, this has become kind of a signature of authoritarianism, is targeting vaccines, targeting science, and targeting scientists as public enemies. And so this is what I mean. It's become an international force, and it's a politically motivated force. You know, when you look at Stalinist Russia in the 1930s and 40s, that's exactly what they did, and helped precipitate massive famines in the USSR in the 30s and 40s. Maybe 2 to 3 million people perished because of it. So that shows you how dangerous anti-science could become. We're not at those numbers yet, but I'm worried. I'm very concerned about this rise in anti-science aggression. And basically what you're seeing play out now in Washington is revisionist history, and basically saying, no, it was they're trying to say it was the vaccines that killed, not COVID, or that the scientists invented the virus in the first place, which is also not true. We have massive evidence showing the natural origins of COVID. So I am worried that as we head towards the 2024 election, this kind of revisionist thinking in history will become dominant. I think the health sector and the science sector doesn't quite know what to do because it's a political assault. And we need the help of our people who understand how politics works in America to know how to diffuse it. We are a nation built on science and technology. It's what gave us the Manhattan Project and Silicon Valley and the race to the moon and all of our medicines that we have and vaccines. And now that's under threat. And that gets to the core of, why America is such an extraordinary place and potentially could destabilize our democracy as well. And now it's being flipped on its side and being attacked. And so I think it's going to undermine our national security. Scientists need to feel comfortable taking on social justice issues and combating anti-science activism. I think, too often they don't have the support even of their universities or academic health centers. Or basically they're told, look, you're an academic, you have freedom to speak, ... but don't screw this up and put the institution at risk. And that has a chilling effect as well.
Next, we look at the future of the UNGA. Preparing the youth of today to help solve the problems of tomorrow is what Portugal's ambassador to the UN, Ana Paula Zacaras, had in mind when she helped lead efforts to pass a UN resolution encouraging member states to support the model UN. Here's what the ambassador told VOA about the programme.
At least 100 countries do these model UNs, and they do it regularly. So it's a way of young people to get involved in the way of the United Nations. How do we work? How do we get things done? The United Nations is the place where the world gets together, where we have a dialogue, where we try to find consensus to make a better world and to make a better world for the generations of today and for tomorrow. So young people, when they participate in these UN models, they have the possibility of discussing the priorities that we have: human rights, climate change, the questions of civil engagement, the possibility of people participating in their civic life.
My colleague Laurel Bowman visited a group of students at a school in a town near Washington, D.C. to get their view. Laurel?
Hi, Jessica. So the students we met here at Poolsville High School in Maryland think it's crucial to understand how the UN operates, and they're passionate about a variety of issues.
So Model UN, it's basically a model of the United Nations in the name. So you will represent a country and you will debate with other delegates about certain issues.
As the academic year starts at Poolsville High School in Maryland, Model UN leaders are recruiting for their club. Curious students are skipping lunch to hear their peer leaders. The room is full.
So it kind of gets you familiar with other countries' positions and stuff like that.
As an icebreaker, the Model UN leaders invite students to defend their positions on which course of study at the school is best.
Global ecology is the best program. One, because we benefit the other programs mutually. So we benefit the whole school community by making it greener, making it cleaner.
After the recruitment drive, the Model UN leaders discuss the global issues many young people care about, including artificial intelligence and the environment.
With the rise of ChatGPT and a lot of other LLMs, we've seen the rapid growth and potential misuse of this technology. I think it's really a part of UN. The UN can even step in to maybe make these changes and help to restrain it.
The narrative surrounding environmental science and the environment in general seems to be very overly pessimistic, in which we think of a future where essentially the world is doomed. We're going to die because of all of this. But something I really want to do is focus on, I guess, a more solution-oriented approach to environmental science.
Exactly.
Finding solutions to world problems through forums like the Model UN is also on Renee Kim's mind.
So you're all about trying to come to a consensus, even though there's so many countries with different opinions. You're trying to reach a single solution that'll help and benefit everyone.
Hundreds of thousands of students across the world take part in the Model UN each year. They, like the young leaders here in Maryland, find the skills help them in life as public speakers, researchers, and collaborators working to resolve global issues. Laurel Bowman, VOA News in Poolsville, Maryland.
Thanks for watching. You can stay up to date with all the news at voanews.com. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at VOA News, and you can follow me on X at Jessica Jaree. Catch up on past episodes at our free streaming service VOA+. For everyone, I'm Jessica Dorit, reporting from the United Nations. We'll see you next week for the Inside Story.